Just when you thought Riot was done with the champion, at long last we finally had the new Shyvana rework on the way. Somewhere out there, Nikki Boy's cracking open a cold one. Or 20, something like that. With the upcoming release of the new Shyvana VGU, this will be the first time since I believe Skarner, where today's episode will be both the champion first impression video and a rework retrospective. By this point, it's become a near objective fact that Shyvana by all accounts is one of the worst champions in the entire game. Not only is she one of the least played champions of all time, but even when she's played, the experience of playing her often leans more on the negative than positive, not just by those playing her, but those playing with her as well. Unfortunate, given her admittedly appealing concept idea. With that in mind, what I'll be going through is a brief overview of her old abilities and why they were so bad, before comparing them to their new iterations to find out whether they managed to address the issues affecting her popularity and gameplay. It's been a long time coming, so let's not waste any more time and get started. The premise of Shyvana is the all too familiar half-dragon who can then transform into a full dragon motif, nothing we haven't seen before in other games, and there's a reason it happens so often. From a thematic point of view, it presents an appealing fantasy of a massive power spike that lets you tear through enemies around you Super Saiyan style. It's why so many juggernauts have steroid ultimates. Few things have the same satisfaction that being an overwhelming raid boss 1v9ing everything does. Shyvana was supposed to represent that, but why exactly did she fail to be the intimidating force she was expected to be? Likely the primary and central problem with her is that Shyvana suffers from an identity crisis. Everywhere it feels like her kit is meant to do different things at different times, and while there is a through line connecting their functions, the execution of said through line made her feel like a generic beatdown stat checker than an actual dragon. Her main characteristic was of course her ability to transform into a big dragon to empower her abilities, tearing through enemy champions the way an actual dragon would. However, being part of the outdated duelist archetype, each of her skills were more focused on achieving that priority than her actual dragon priority. As you know, dragons are known to be resilient, and Shyvana's means of dueling was by generally being tankier than the opposition. The way they tried to implement that was through Fury of the Dragonborn, giving her bonus armor and magic resist based on the number of dragons her team took down. Shyvana's passive was legendarily ridiculed for being so underwhelming and may as well have never existed. At best, you could only obtain 4 dragons and 1, maybe 2 Elder Drakes in a game. By going through all that work, your grand prize was only 30 bonus armor and magic resist, which isn't nothing mind you, but compared to Sejuani's passive, Frost Armor, granting her north of 100 armor and magic resist and slow immunity for a time, or Ornn's passive, Living Forge, giving him up to 30% bonus armor, magic resist, and health. I don't think anyone would argue against calling Fury the Dragonborn one of, if not the worst passive in the game. It was barely noticeable. Such paltry defense made it difficult for Shyvana to live up to her Juggernaut raid boss status. By nature, the class is known to have some of the more durable fighters in the game, capable of withstanding pressure almost to the same degree as a tank, but with the extra benefit of dishing out considerable damage of their own. Once again though, if you compared Shyvana's quote-unquote defensive ability with any other Juggernaut's defensive ability, it's as if she never got one. What's 5 armor and magic resist to Dr. Mundo's immense healing, Udyr's giant shields, or Garen's W, which, I mean, come on, look at them. Why is a passive on Garen's W better than a champion's actual passive? Sadly, nothing else in Shyvana's kit save for her ultimate's insignificant health boost did anything to give her any semblance of durability or survivability. That was one of the big things I noticed about the new Shyvana. They wanted to give her meaningful defense to actually make her feel like a juggernaut, and the way they did this is with a new passive and a new W. Scale Mail causes her to gain stacking armor and magic resist whenever she takes down jungle camps, large minions, or enemy champions. Simply put, in true dragon fashion, because apparently every dragon champion is going down this route, rather than being tied exclusively to dragons, Shyvana can now increase her passive against any major enemy or neutral unit. What this aims to accomplish is make her passive more consistent and substantiated throughout the course of a game. It isn't that stacking armor and magic resist was the problem with her old one, it's that you acquired so little of it and couldn't really keep building it. If on the other hand, instead of flat armor and magic resist, it was percent armor and magic resist, then yeah, a permanent 30% bonus armor and MR upon taking 4 dragons and an elder would be a significant amount. So immediately, Scale Mail is a better passive than Dragonborn. That's not really saying much on account of how low the bar was. Couple things I'm concerned about though. 1. Large minions. Laners already get tilted when junglers gratuitously tax lane, especially the cannon minion. Nowadays, junglers get sufficient golden experience from clearing camps, so even if they give their laner the kill from a gank, the most they can do is bring enemy minions down to low HP to help the laner push. But if cannon minions provide stacks, I can see this becoming a bit of a concern with Shyvana players smiting cannon minions in the name of building her passive. Again, probably not going to be too big of an issue, but we'll have to see. The other concern though, and the more pragmatic one, limitation. We have infinitely scaling ability power in the form of Vhagar, infinitely scaling range in the form of Senna and Kindred, infinitely scaling health in the form of Swain, Sion, and Cho'Gath, infinitely scaling attack speed in the form of Bel'Veth and Kindred, infinitely scaling MR in the form of Thresh. At this point, Lee gets a champion who can indefinitely raise one of any stat in the game, except AD. For the most part, it's implemented in a way to ensure a champion doesn't scale out of control. For Shyvana though, the fact that she can gain bonus armor and magic resist by simply farming raises a potential red flag. Armor and MR are risky stats to scale infinitely because of how effective it can be relative to other stats. Generally speaking, infinitely scaling offense, whether Smolder Dragon Practice, Aurelion Soul Stardust, Vhagar Evil, what have you, tend to be less problematic even if the champion's allowed to scale into the late game because their weaknesses are still there. Smolder can have 1,000 stacks, but a lot of good that'll do if he gets caught by a Blitzhook. Even infinitely scaling health, one of the more abundant stats in the game, isn't as problematic on account of there being a near universal way to fight against it, percent health damage. That's why Heartsteal's permitted to exist. Under no circumstances can Riot ever create a Heartsteal for armor and magic resist because that's significantly harder to deal with. We do have tank busting items like Black Cleaver, LDR, Void Staff and such, but those are items that must be purchased by select champions, thereby presenting a wider barrier to entry than an overwhelming majority of champions having percent health damage in their base kit, even tanks. It can be a delicate balancing situation. Give the champion too little resistances and it becomes meaningless, like how the old Shyvana passive gave so little armor and MR for how much work you had to do to get it that she may as well have not gotten anything. But give the champion too much armor and MR and they can become invincible 1v9ing the game. Based on her numbers on the PBE, she gets just under half a point of armor and MR per stack, with champions and epic monsters granting 3 stacks. As usual, numbers are subject to change based on balance. Anyway, from what I can tell, Scale Mill is slightly better than Dragonborn in rate of stat increase given the more abundant sources of acquiring stacks, as well as the fact that you can permanently increase it. Technically, the old one could infinitely scale as well, but games would never go on past more than 2 Elder Drakes. I haven't tested it myself, but my prediction is on average a 25 to 30 minute game produces anywhere between 50 to 75 bonus armor and MR, assuming good CS and kill participation, so it is a measurable amount. The other sustainability, Inferno Aegis, is a completely new addition to her kit. It still carries a boost of speed that Burnout used to provide, but instead of a fire circle around her, it gives her a shield based on her bonus health and the number of enemies nearby. It's also accompanied by an explosion reminiscent of Vibrant's Trigger Seed. Curiously, while in Dragon form, Shyvana also heals if the explosion hits at least one champion. So she went from having no healing or shielding to having both, which isn't a bad thing, mind you. Scaling based on her passive is also a nice touch. On paper, I like this new ability, not only because Shyvana really could use some upfront burst protection, especially when she goes in, but because it presents a condition. The old Burnout was sort of a blanket increase in pressure, consistent yes, but there was a hard cap on how much you could get out of it. Inferno Aegis doesn't give her the same DPS or speed as Burnout, but when timed correctly, the payoff allows her to survive in situations the old Shyvana never would've. If you look at other reworks, you'll find stuff like this all the time, where they take an old ability that offered unconditional benefit and made it more conditional, but in doing so, it can potentially give a bigger payout cast for cast than the old one. For example, Olaf's ultimate, it used to be just a flat 6-second duration. The current iteration has only a 3-second duration, but he can extend it indefinitely so long as he keeps attacking. Burnout was a boost to speed and some AoE damage, making it good for general movement and clearing, but not really giving any playmaking potential in a fight. Inferno Aegis doesn't offer the same potential tempo increase, but what it has given her is a much stronger engage and trade game. Point being, there's an element of skill expression to it, whether time or place. I think that's the overall MO with her VGU, giving her more skill expression by adding conditional elements in her kit. Ember Strike, for example, doesn't have the cooldown refund that Twin Bite used to have, nor does it apply on-it effects twice. However, on top of now having a watered-down version of the on-it magic damage her Flame Breath Mark used to do, it's become a Zahen Camille type Q, wherein she gets 2 empowered auto attacks. So from her Q and W, I'm expecting a conventional build path to be something like Triforce, Sterex, and Visage, very standard Juggernaut stuff. The different shapes of her 2 attacks are interesting as well. First one's a cone AoE, the other is a circle, and while in Dragon form she gets a 3rd cast that deals true damage. It might seem a bit concerning that Shyvana is able to do physical damage, percent max out magic damage, and true damage, but Shyvana was always known to do mixed damage, and bear in mind, Juggernauts are tank busters, they're supposed to be good at shredding bulky champions. I'm fairly confident you'll either see Spellblade Shyvana or an on-hit Shyvana, so kinda the same items you used to build on her. Once again, compared to Twin Bites, which was meant to be more consistent, albeit a somewhat underwhelming ability, Ember Strike packs a bigger punch in that you get 2 or 3 empowered auto attacks up front. In other words, you have to be mindful of when and how you use it. Oddly enough, the one ability I expected them to change the most ended up changing the least. Flame Breath has become Molten Burst. It no longer has the marked damage having been reallocated to her Q, but the ability itself is still more or less the same. A fireball that stops on the first enemy hit and exploding for a bit of damage around the area. Although this one comes with a slow, which it didn't have before. In dragon form, the fireball can pass through enemies and leave a trail of fire behind it, similarly to a Corki W. From what I can tell by the numbers, the damage has been dialed down dramatically. They probably don't want people to play Torpedo Shyvana anymore, which I'm perfectly on board with. I don't think that's a very fun thing to go up against, and it's not really productive for Shyvana herself. The added slow and AoE coverage makes it more of a utility spell. That being said, the ability does specify that it quadratically scales. Vandrel actually made a video demonstrating it where if multiple champions are standing next to each other, it will create an explosion that can damage all nearby enemies per champion hit, meaning if Shyvana can strike the entire enemy team, she can cause all of them to do more damage on each other, which multiplies on itself. That being said, I don't know if AP Shyvana will be as viable as it was before. Flame Breath was overpowered because of the sheer base damage it had and being unconditional. You threw a massive torpedo at the enemy team for big damage. Molten Burst has the potential to do equal damage to Flame Breath if not more, but it's a lot more circumstantial now. Altogether, we'll have to wait and see how she comes out on live release. Her Dragon's Descent's about the same, with the main exception being that the knockback is now a fear to match the animation flying over enemies instead of through them. Something I do want to point out though is that when Shyvana first came out on the PvE, like day 1, her W shield and ultimate health boost used to increase based on her scale mail stacks, but then about a day after, they backpedaled on that and took it away. I'm not sure why, because that was actually a really nice touch on their part and I think they should have kept it in, although if I were to hazard a guess, it was because it would have made Shyvana way too snowballing. Increasing her armor and MR would already be a big advantage in combat. She could build DPS items without being that squishy. If you were to augment her shielding and max health capability, you're giving a champion effectively passive armor, MR, and health all in one. For a tank like Ornn, that's permissible because his damage is capped. If you actually try to build damage on Ornn, none of his abilities will get stronger, but for a fighter like Shyvana who can build DPS items, compensating her defensive parameters by simply existing is pretty risky. I mean, imagine Garen being able to infinitely scale Courage's armor and MR and gain a stacking HP shield. He'd be unstoppable, right? Altogether, the good things about her rework are that 1, she has meaningful scaling. Shyvana was a really weird juggernaut in that she actually fell off extremely hard late game compared to her peers. Normally, juggernauts are supposed to be consistently strong early, mid, and late, but Shyvana was the only one besides maybe Nasus to have a weak early game, strong mid game, and then a weak late game again. With her new passive though, just like any other infinite scaler, she'll start weak and then ramp up as time goes on. Worst case scenario, the scaling on her W and ultimate will ensure she can be a meteor frontline for her team, and the max health damage and true damage on her Q should keep her DPS on par with other juggernauts. 2. She went from a champion who runs at you and smacks you to death into a more trade-oriented juggernaut with her new W shield and Q synergizing very well with Spellblade. That might present an opportunity for lane Shyvana, although I don't think that's a good idea. She needs scale mail. Do I wish they could have done something a bit more interesting? Perhaps. I kind of wish they followed the same idea that Smolder and Aesol do, where their abilities evolve or grow in more ways than just power, but at the same time Shyvana's a melee juggernaut. If she could evolve like Smolder and Aesol, she would be really overpowered. That aside, the main concern I have with her is the potential balancing issue of her becoming far too tanky with all the armor, MR, shielding, and bonus health you get from her ultimate. Mind you, after they took away the scale mail values on her W and ultimate, my fears were alleviated somewhat, but infinitely scaling resistances by simply farming creeps and having no cap is definitely prone to causing trouble than say Sion's W passive. There's a reason Garen can't stack up Courage indefinitely. Shyvana should be durable, no mistake, but not if it means you can go full DPS and still be unkillable. If my math is correct though, and she gets only 100 to 150 scale mail by 25 to 30 minutes, then I think we'll be okay, cause it's only like 50 to 60 armor and MR, only marginally better than her old passive. We'll have to see, but for now, not too bad. At the end of the day, this rework is more of a Fiddlesticks, Pantheon, or Shen type rework where they retain most of her old kit's feel but add more playmaking nuance to it compared to a complete reimagining like Poppy or Aatrox. I think ultimately she'll still play kind of like a stat checker, but at the same time, there's nothing wrong with that. Not every champion has to be this hyper-mechanical outplay god. We already have too many of those anyway. What do you guys think about Shyvana? Do you like how they retrofitted her, or do you wish they were a bit more ambitious? Let me know in the comments down below. That'll be all for today, so if you enjoyed the video, I would appreciate it if you'd like to like and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars and join my Discord server, and check out my other rework retrospective and champion first impressions videos if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.